A Senate report provides damning new details about Donald Trump's attempts to get the Justice Department to overturn the election, and yet former Trump allies who criticized him for the attempted coup, like Nikki Haley and Mike Pence, are pathetically falling back in line. For more on this, it's time for a closer look. If you recall, and I know it's hard to remember since it happened approximately 78 years ago, Donald Trump whipped up a violent mob to attack the Capitol and stage an insurrection in order to overturn the results of a free and fair election. I'm no lawyer, but that alone seems to me like a crime worthy of jail time. And by the way, when I say I'm not a lawyer, that doesn't mean I don't know lawyers. I feel like everyone I know is a lawyer. The other day, I was at the dentist's office getting a cleaning, and when I mentioned a parking ticket, my hygienist said, "Do you need representation?" and gave me his card. Although I should be clear, my dental hygienist is Rudy Giuliani. I'm sorry, he's just cheaper. I think it's because he uses helium instead of nitrous. I say that because it always hurts a ton, and when I scream in pain, it sounds like this.
Oh, God, no!
All right. And yet it seems like not only is Trump likely to avoid jail, but according to a report from earlier this week, he wants to run for president again.
New reporting on Donald Trump's future presidential ambitions. 3 sources tell the Washington Post that Trump asked advisors whether he should announce his 2024 bid for the White House after the chaotic exit in Afghanistan. And those advisors, quote, urged patience. That's the quote, patience. But behind the scenes, there's concern that Democrats could benefit during the 2022 midterms if Trump decides to jump into the presidential race before that.
It says a lot about how unpopular Trump is that his advisors had to tell him to wait to announce his candidacy or it would help Democrats. But would anyone really be shocked if he ran again? He tried everything in and out of his power to stay in the White House even though he lost. He begged the Georgia Secretary of State to find some votes like he was Jack Lemmon in a phone booth. Assuming he's not going to run again is like hitting Michael Myers with a car and thinking the movie's over. Oh, he fell down. Okay, we're all safe now. We can turn our backs on him. Trump probably understands the place he'd be safest from his current legal troubles is the White House, so it makes sense he'd want to get back there. He treats the job less like a massive responsibility and more like a safe base in a game of middle school tag. I'm touching the Oval Office wall. I'm safe when I'm touching the wall. You can't arrest me. I'm touching the wall. So Trump is reportedly considering running again, and other aspiring Republicans have said they'll wait until he makes the decision before they decide to run themselves.
Former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley now says the Republican Party needs former President Trump, and she'll consult with him if she makes a bid for the White House.
She called Donald Trump a friend and said she would consult with him before launching a run for the White House. We need him in the Republican Party. I don't want us to go back to the days before Trump.
You don't? What was wrong with the days before Trump? Too many alive people? Not enough breaking news alerts? There was so much insanity during Trump that the breaking news banner was seared into my flat screen even when it was off. But that tells you everything right there. They want the Trump years back again. That's what happens when you're a boring, soulless hack who's dedicated your life to pursuing power above all else in a place like official Washington, where everyone around you is a balding weirdo with no interest aside from raising money and running for things, or maybe writing one of these airport terminal dust catchers. The Nikki Haleys of the world used to spend their time at boring think tank cocktail parties where the hot topic was who's getting invited to the Heritage Foundation Christmas party. Then suddenly an amoral reality show psycho like Trump comes along and uses dirty words, and they think they're in Hollywood now. It's like when you go to Times Square for the first time and think you're meeting the real Iron Man. He said he was going to use his jet boots to fly away, but then I saw him smoking a cigarette on the F train. That's what happened to Lindsey Graham. He started out hating Trump, like Trump was a slick out-of-towner dating his Meemaw. But then Graham realized he could be in show business, and everything changed. Meemaw, Mr. Trump says he's going to get me a job in the pictures. I just need to give him $200 for new headshots. What do you mean, how am I going to get $200? We're going to sell the farm, you old coot. That's why Nikki Haley wants Trump days back and why she suddenly considers Trump her friend again after telling Politico earlier this year that he was no longer welcome in national politics. I think he's going to find himself further and further isolated. I don't think he's going to be in the picture. I don't think he can. He's fallen so far. We need to acknowledge he let us down. He went down a path he shouldn't have, and we shouldn't have followed him. We shouldn't have listened to him, and we can't let that ever happen again. Let's be honest. These people were always going to forgive him. Republicans are like the rich housewife who finds lipstick on her husband's collar and tells her friend, he says he got it because he slipped and fell into a makeup counter. And you know, the floor at Bloomingdale's is like an ice skating rink. So the Nikki Haleys and Lindsey Grahams of the world briefly distanced themselves from Trump and then quickly fell back in line, despite the fact that he repeatedly tried to overturn the results of a free and fair election and destroy our democracy. And it isn't like January 6th was just some protest that got out of hand after an impulsive Trump vented his frustrations. They had a plan. In fact, they had multiple plans, as we've explained before. And one of Trump's lawyers, a guy named John Eastman, even wrote an instruction manual for Mike Pence laying out exactly how to overturn the election results, which he did not have the power to do. And Trump even brought them together in the Oval Office to try to convince Pence to go through with it.
Stunning new details on Donald Trump's efforts to overturn the 2020 election from the new book Peril by Bob Woodward and Robert Costa. The authors report on a 2-page memo drafted by John Eastman. John Eastman is a conservative lawyer who was working for Trump's legal team. It amounts to a blueprint for a coup. NBC News has later obtained the memo. It outlines how Pence was to have disrupted the certification of the Electoral College results and handed the election to Trump. Trump tells Pence this about Eastman, quote, "You really need to listen to John. He's a respected constitutional scholar. Hear him out. Listen to John."
But even weirder are the juvenile tactics Trump used to try to persuade Pence to go through with it. If these people say you had the power, wouldn't you want to, Trump asked. I wouldn't want any one person to have that authority, Pence responded. But wouldn't it almost be cool to have that power, Trump asked. You don't understand, Mike, Trump said. You can do this. I don't want to be your friend anymore if you don't do this. The following day, on the morning of January 6th, he reportedly called Pence and taunted, if you don't do it, I picked the wrong man 4 years ago, adding, you're going to wimp out. So he used the same tactics as a 14-year-old trying to convince his friend to steal a Kit Kat from a convenience store. Just hide it under your shirt. I can't do that. But wouldn't it be, like, cool if you did? I don't know if I can be friends with a wimp, Mike. Also, I love that Trump was the most powerful man in the world with virtually unlimited resources at his fingertips, and yet he thought his biggest leverage was threatening not to be Mike Pence's friend anymore. You're a terrible friend. I doubt Mike Pence was thinking, oh no, now who's going to help me with my sofa next time I have to move? Also, we know about all this. Can you imagine what we don't know about? So far, Bob Woodward's Trump books have been called Fear, Rage, and Peril, but at this rate, he's going to have to call the next one, Get a Load of this guy. Yet Pence is now doing the same song and dance as Nikki Haley and acting like that whole mob riot thing was no big deal.
The president and I sat down a few days later and talked through all of it. I can tell you that we parted amicably at the end of the administration, and we've talked a number of times since we both left office. But I believe that our entire focus today should be on the future. I know the media wants to distract from the Biden administration's failed agenda by focusing on one day in January.
One day in January? There was a day where a violent mob was chanting Hang Seth Meyers. I wouldn't call it one day in January. I'd call it the day I moved to Portugal and grew a beard. One day in January makes it sound like a sports movie starring Al Pacino as a past his prime football coach. Boom! All right, let's pick a play. We got a passing play, we got running plays. Or how about this? We just hang the opposing quarterback. That's hard-nosed football, muchacho. Last day to do my Pacino. Oh, I meant last day to do my Pacino without a standing ovation. And that wasn't the only Oval Office meeting where Trump tried to pressure a senior government official to help him overthrow democracy. We also know that one of his henchmen in the Justice Department, a guy named Jeffrey Clark, had a detailed plan for getting the Justice Department to interfere and declare there was fraud in the election, which there was not. And now, thanks to a new report from the Senate Judiciary Committee, we have more details about that plan and that meeting.
After an 8-month investigation, the Senate Judiciary Committee today will release a report on how the Trump administration attempted to subvert the law in an effort to keep the president in office. The report provides new details on the efforts of then acting Assistant Attorney General Jeffrey Clark as he attempted to do the bidding of President Trump.
The President of the United States decided to put full court pressure on the new acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen. And as I said before, he was relentless. When you look at the number of contacts, we're still waiting for even more evidence to come in on that subject. He was really pushing the Department of Justice to bend to his political will. And I will tell you, I don't think I'm overstating the case. We were a half step away from a full-blown constitutional crisis.
Now, of course, half a step is still a lot for Trump, given how he takes steps. I've never seen a person as confident as him walk as gingerly as he does. He walks down a ramp like a deer on a frozen pond. If you couldn't see his shoes, you'd think he was wearing roller skates for the first time. But that's how close we came. Trump tried every avenue he could think of, the courts, the states, the vice president, the Justice Department. He's like the guy in gridlock traffic who keeps switching lanes and then throws his hand up when it doesn't work. We're on the FDR at 5 in the afternoon. There's no secret way out, buddy. In the end, the only thing that stopped Trump apparently was a threat from senior DOJ officials to resign. As the New York Times reported yesterday, just days before the insurrection, Trump held a meeting in the Oval Office about his plans for a coup. On the agenda was Trump's desire to install a loyalist as acting attorney general to carry out his demands for more aggressive investigations into his unfounded claims of election fraud. On the other side were the top leaders of the Justice Department who warned Trump that they and other senior officials would resign en masse if he followed through. They received immediate support from another key participant, Pat Cipollone, the White House counsel. Trump's proposed plan, Cipollone argued, would be a murder-suicide pact. Pretty dramatic language. Woodward's going to have to up the ante on that next book even more than I thought. Although murder-suicide pact probably sounded good to Trump when he first heard it. So I murder you and then you commit suicide? I think I saw something like that once on SVU. We love SVU, don't we, folks? A great American program. We love Mr. Ice Lemonade and Richard Seltzer, a real original. Detective John Munch. Richard Seltzer started as a comedian. People don't know that. But I remember I saw him in 1983 at Catch a Rising Star. Nice guy, good guy, hated my guts. The GOP has fallen back in line behind a guy who did everything he could to overthrow democracy and absolutely will try again if given the chance, a chance he apparently very much wants. The details in this Senate report are damning, and there are almost certainly more to come. There's enough material in here, for ESPN. Wow, this is a real tee-up. I don't know where this is going. You guys, I never know what the last clip's going to be. That's something, we're just going to share it. This is our last night without an audience. Let's just talk to the people at home and let them inside, behind the curtain, so to speak. There's enough material here for ESPN to do a 4-part 30 for 30 and call it...
One day in January.
This has been a closer look. God's Love We Deliver cooks and brings over 2 million meals a year to men, women, and children living with HIV/AIDS, cancer, and other serious illnesses, and they need your help now more than ever. If you're watching this online, you can hit the donate button. Stay safe, get vaccinated. We love you.